Here's what's coming up on The World Today. The Italian ambassador to the Democratic Republic of Congo, Luca Attanasio, is killed in a UN convoy attack. Protesters in Myanmar defy military warning to rally against the coup. Plus, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson set to unveil what he calls a cautious plan to lift England's lockdown. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Akaite Afia here in Lagos. Italy's ambassador to the Democratic Republic of Congo, Luca Attanasio, has been killed in an attack north of the city of Goma in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The incident happened at 10:15 local time today, and it is still not clear who was behind the attack. But armed groups are known to operate in and around Virunga National Park, where it occurred. The 43-year-old had been traveling in a UN convoy when it came under fire. The government, on the other hand, believes the attack was an attempted kidnapping. Ambassador Attanasio's body is believed to have been taken to a field hospital in Goma. He was not the only one killed, so was 30-year-old Italian military policeman Vittorio Lacovacci and Congolese driver whose name has not yet been released. But all three have been confirmed dead by the Italian government. Italy's Foreign Minister Luigi Di Maio has expressed great dismay and immense sorrow at the killing, saying no effort will be spared to shed light on what happened. Militias also clash regularly in the east of the country, where a large UN force is struggling to keep the peace. Mr. Attanasio had represented Italy in the DR Congo since 2017. He joined the diplomatic service in 2003 and spent time in Morocco and Nigeria. Let's talk to former permanent secretary at the Nigerian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Joe Keshi. He joins us now from Abuja. Welcome to the program, Ambassador. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me today.
So tell us, what do you make of Ambassador Attanasio's killing and the impact that this could have on Italy-DRC relations?
First, my condolences to the Italian government and indeed to the family of the slain envoy. It is not yet clear exactly what happened, but this is some of the dangers that diplomats face in crisis in countries that are relatively unstable. And I think with this, people can appreciate why some of the advanced countries or countries all over the world occasionally issue, travel advice, to their envoys not to leave the capital, to stay in the capital, which is relatively safer than traveling into the interior of the countries, So again, our condolences to the family and to the government of Italy. But the truth remains that this is some of the dangers that diplomats face in the course of their duty.
Well, it does really shine a light on the vulnerability and risk involved with posting foreign diplomats to volatile areas. You've served in such areas, so what is the usual strategy and protocol for being in such situations, even though in this case, the insecurity in the DRC is well known?
Well, it depends. It depends on where you are and the nature of the crisis, itself. This is where you have bandits and a bunch of rebellious characters roaming around that area where the ambassador was killed. In some parts of the world where diplomats do serve, it's a total war. So nations have strategies and plans to pull out their diplomats if the dangers increase. But where the dangers are not as apparent as this, this is not a civil war. The country has been relatively peaceful. I think their ambassador was in the course of his normal duty, traveling with the UN, God knows to where now. We've not been told exactly what they were going to do. But the truth is that it is part of the dangers that diplomats face. I've had the occasion to serve in two war areas, Ethiopia and in Sierra Leone. In the case of Sierra Leone, we woke up one morning and we were refugees on the American boats. A ship. We were saved by the Americans. So it's not unusual. So when people complain that diplomats spend their time drinking champagne and tea. They should also realize that diplomats are vulnerable, that they do die in the course of their, serving their countries.
Well, is there any reason that you think the Italian ambassador could have been targeted in this attack?
No, until the details are not yet very clear, and nobody seems to have a clear idea of what exactly happened. The best, we have right now are speculations. Either it was a kidnapping attack that went wrong, or it was some operations, being carried out by the, by the attackers around the region. But one thing is very clear. This is an area that is very volatile. This is an area in which you have various groups operating, against the legitimate government of the DRC. So in situations like this, anything is possible. And looking at your pictures, I believe that these are the pictures from that part of the country. You could see how very well armed UN observers are. It just shows you the danger in some of these things. So until we are very clear as to exactly the motive, it's difficult to actually speculate accurately what happened. But certainly, in my mind, I think it's probably a case of probably kidnapping that went wrong, because it would have been lucrative for the kidnappers if they have taken him as a hostage and taken any of the UN envoys, UN troops, member troops as hostage. And then they will negotiate and probably make some good money. So it's possible, until we are very clear and until we have a clear-cut idea of what happened, we can only live with speculations.
Yes, well, we will be keeping an eye on the situation there to see how it does play out. But thanks again, Ambassador Keshi, for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, thank you. More anti-coup protests are still taking place across Myanmar despite government's efforts to crack down on the peaceful demonstrations. Today's businesses closed as employees joined a general strike. The military has warned the protesters are inciting the people to a confrontation path where they will suffer the loss of life.
Businesses were closed in Myanmar on Monday in a general strike called to oppose the military coup as thousands of protesters gathered in towns and cities despite a chilling message from the junta that confrontation would cost more lives. Outside the country, hundreds of Myanmar nationals in Thailand also gathered in front of the United Nations headquarters in Bangkok to coincide with the nationwide strike taking place across the home country against the military coup. The army seized power in Myanmar after alleging fraud in the November 8 elections was won by Aung San Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy, detaining her and much of the party's leadership. However, the Electoral Commission dismissed the fraud complaints. In the meantime, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres is urging Myanmar's military to halt repression and release hundreds detained since the coup.
Today, I call on the Myanmar military to stop the repression immediately, release the prisoners, end the violence, respect human rights and the will of the people expressed in recent elections. Coups have no place in our modern world. I welcome the resolution of the Human Rights Council, pledge to implement your requests and express my full support to the people of Myanmar in their pursuit of democracy, peace, human rights and the rule of law.
Hello. Also, the European Union says it may impose sanctions on Myanmar as a last resort.
We actually cannot continue to watch this idly. That is why we'll use all diplomatic channels that are still available to work towards a de-escalation in Myanmar. But at the same time, we will also prepare ourselves for the eventuality that we do not succeed in contributing to the de-escalation and as a last resort, reserve the right to use sanctions against the military regime in Myanmar and ready to do so.
In a country where dates are seen as auspicious, protesters in Myanmar note the significance of the date 22 to 2021, comparing it with demonstrations on August 8, 1988, when a previous generation staged anti-military protests that were brutally suppressed.
Well, let's take a look at the United States, where at least 300,000 Texans still have not had their power restored following the historic deadly winter storm. Governor Greg Abbott says power will be restored to people later on today. But in the meantime, food drives are appearing across the city to help people in need of food and water. Volunteers are also around these spots handing out supplies. There has also been some dispute about utility bills. And according to the governor, regulators will temporarily ban power companies from billing customers or disconnecting them for non-payment.
For power to be generated in the state of Texas is at full capacity. As of about an hour ago, there still remained about 30,000 Texans who did not have access to power. If they did not have access to power, the reason for it is because of their local power provider, where they still need to get hookups, or there could be power lines down. Based upon the speed that I've seen power get restored, I suspect that all power will be fully restored across the state of Texas to every house either later tonight or tomorrow. To be clear, we will not end this session until the state of Texas is, and all of its power generation capabilities, is fully winterized, so we never go through this again. With regard to how it's going to be funded, every possibility is on the table. We will consider whatever options. We need to figure out the strategy first.
Our correspondent in Washington, Maria Bird, joins us now. Maria, thanks for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me, Akate.
Of course. So tell us why the controversy over power supply and paying bills?
Well, the controversy is really surrounding, the issue of, individuals. We're just coming out of, and we're still really in a pandemic. And so obviously jobs and housing and all these things have been major issues even before these winter storms. And so many people are having a tough time even paying their bills prior to the winter storms. And so when you're looking at people that might have been on the verge of having their electricity cut off, and now with this winter storm having to come into play, obviously electrical companies are looking to, recoup some of their funds as well. And so that's why the governor had to step in and say, listen, we're not going to cut off anyone's power. We're going to work to restore power, because many individuals have been without power for quite some time now as a result of the storms. And so it's just a very, very tough situation. Obviously, there's economics that play a role into this, but most importantly right now is the safety and security of the individuals in the state of Texas, especially those who are without power and without clean water as well.
Well, Maria, let's talk a bit about the food banks, because clearly things are not back to normal in Texas. So fill us in on how people are still coping with the aftermath of the storm.
Well, as you said, we saw video footage of, stores without any food on the shelves, even those who could afford or were willing to go out and purchase food. Obviously, because of the winter storms, many of the trucks, many of the delivery services that would bring foods to stock the grocery stores were not able to get in. So that was one of the major issues with the supply chain that occurred. And as you said, the food banks are becoming ever more important, because people are not able to obviously get food from the stores. But then even we're still dealing with people that are not having the economics or the means to be able to. So food banks were a major source of food supply for many individuals even prior to the storms. And so it's a trickling effect that's occurring obviously here in the state of Texas. And we can see that this is going to be a long-term recovery process. But as you said, being able to have the food banks open and being able to provide those services. We've seen, many individuals from other parts of the country come to assist with providing services. In Washington, there have been truckloads and planes, helicopters bringing in foods from the eastern region to be able to assist in Texas. And so I think this is all hands on deck for everyone across the country, nonprofit agencies, and obviously a federal government to be able to assist in the process.
All right, well, Maria, thanks again for joining us. And we do understand that it's also snowing where you're at in Washington, so hopefully it won't be as bad as it's been in Texas. Do stay safe.
Thank you, Kate.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has announced steps to ease the restriction of lockdowns on the country imposed to curb the coronavirus pandemic. He says restrictions in all areas will be eased at the same time, but there will be at least 5 weeks between each of 4 steps set out. Step 1 will happen on March 8th, with pupils and students in all schools and further education settings to returning to face-to-face teaching. There will be no curfew under Step 2, but the rule of 6 does return, especially for residents of care homes. By March 29th, outdoor sports facilities such as tennis or basketball courts and open-air swimming pools could reopen and organized sports can begin. Step 3 would happen no earlier than May 17th, and Step 4 will remove limits on weddings. Here's more on the situation in other countries in our global update.
With more than 120,000 fatalities, Britain has suffered the world's 5th highest official death toll from the pandemic, and its $3 trillion economy, its biggest crash in more than 300 years. But a fast start to the vaccine rollout, plus a tough near 2-month national lockdown, means government can now set out a phased easing of the restrictions in England, prioritizing the return of children to school and social mixing outdoors.
The 8th of March, of course, is the date that we want all schools to reopen, so that we work with schools, as we have been doing throughout this period, to make sure that they're ready to reopen safely. So on the 8th of March, it's 2 people being able to meet outdoors for a coffee or socially. On the 29th of March, it'll be 2 families, or the rule of 6, meeting outdoors and outdoor sports.
Meanwhile, Italy's new Prime Minister, Mario Draghi, and his cabinet have approved a decree to continue restricting movement between regions until March the 27th. The ban on movement between regions, with people allowed to travel only for reasons of work, health, or other emergencies, was due to expire on March the 5th. But the government has now extended it, as the health emergency shows no sign of slowing. In Asia, Hong Kong's leader Carrie Lam has received China's Sinovac vaccine, together with top officials at a live televised event to bolster public confidence ahead of the vaccine's rollout in the global financial hub this week. Sinovac is the first COVID-19 vaccine to be introduced in Hong Kong, ahead of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine set to arrive in the Chinese Special Administrative Region before the end of February. Finally, Israel has launched a coronavirus Green Pass system, which allows people who have been vaccinated to access public facilities that would otherwise be off-limit. As of Sunday, COVID-19 inoculation is a sort of status symbol in Israel. Israelis who have gotten both Pfizer vaccine shots and those who have recovered from the virus get a Green Pass certificate in the form of a QR code or printout for people without smartphones. The pass allows entry to gyms, swimming pools, hotels, entertainment venues, and sporting events. Restaurants and bars will be added to the list in March.
An ally to jailed Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny says EU sanctions in response to his jailings would send a clear message to Russia. Leonid Volkov is Navalny's chief of staff, who has been in Brussels to lobby foreign ministers discussing the issue today. His comments come hours before EU ministers agreed to prepare sanctions against 4 Russian officials.
Know that the fundamental reasons for protests are not gone and will be not gone. So, once again, the household income decreases for 8 times in a row. Putin is there for 21 years now. Navalny is in prison. These are the 3 fundamental reasons for the protest, and they will not be gone by spring. We just need some more time to regroup and to prepare, because we pretty much know that, like, if 1,000 people turn out to protest, they will be beaten down. If 10,000 people, police observes them. And if like 100,000, then maybe police joins them. So we're going to do our best to make something really very impressive in spring. That's our main objective now.
New Zealanders are today remembering the 7.1 magnitude earthquake that struck the South Island city of Christchurch, killing 185 people, injuring thousands, and leaving a trail of destruction. Hundreds gathered at a memorial wall in Christchurch to observe a minute's silence. Flags are flying at half-mast. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says it is now time to look ahead, with hope for the future of New Zealand's second largest city.
"10 years sounds like a long time, but for many it will feel like just yesterday that Christchurch, this region, and indeed New Zealand was rocked by the events of February 22nd. The earthquake and aftershocks affected people in complex and diverse ways.
Covered in toxic ashes and buried under thousands of glass bottles, migrants tried to cross on Friday from Africa to the Liberian Peninsula. Spanish police rescued 4 migrants in the Spanish-African enclave of Melilla, that were hiding in an open-top container loaded with glass bottles on board a vessel heading to the peninsula. One officer called for help as he shockingly found one more migrant in very poor conditions inside an airtight bag loaded with toxic ashes coming from an incinerator. A total of 41 migrants were rescued in the operation. 11.669 migrants were located at the security area of Melilla Airport in 2020, and 1.781 have been found since January this year. And finally on the program, 14-year-old girl Freya Headington from the UK has undergone a heart transplant using a new method that capitalizes on harvesting hearts from a wider range of donors, significantly reducing her wait to 2 months from a potential 2 years. In August 2019, she was diagnosed with restrictive cardiomyopathy, which causes tiredness, chest pain, and breathing problems. The procedure, which started at Royal Papworth Hospital in Cambridge, England, can retrieve donor hearts that stop beating on their own after life support is withdrawn, while a special device is able to restart the heart and ensure it is healthy before it is transplanted into a patient. Thanks to the program, Freya got a new heart in only 8 weeks and was able to leave the hospital within 10 days to go on and live life to the fullest again.
In the adult world, we double the amount of heart transplantation and we reduce the waiting time period. And we had to do exactly the same thing for the pediatric recipients. And at the same time, for both populations, to reduce the mortality in the waiting list. And this is what we achieved.
Many of our transplant patients now, they're so sick that they have to wait in the hospital for their transplant, sometimes for 6 months, perhaps even over a year. So not only is it reducing wait times, but it's transplanting patients that otherwise would not get an organ.
Well, that's definitely an amazing breakthrough in the healthcare system. But that is all we have for the program today. I'm Akaite Afia. Have a great evening and stay safe.